Okay, is it okay if we start, Nick?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to do something because I'm started streaming on YouTube, so just want to make sure that it doesn't start playing. Okay, I will start the webinar now. That's it, yes. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar of the European Network on Independent Living, organized in the framework of the European Coalition for the Community Living. It's about a better life. This webinar is a part of a series of webinars on deinstitutionalization, which we have regularly as part of the ECCL to find out what is going on throughout Europe in terms of closing institutions, getting people out of institutions, developing community-based services. And we have a webinar today and tomorrow at the same time. And they're a little bit different. Today, we will be mainly focusing on people who live or lived in institutions. We will be talking about the importance of hearing from people who are in institutions, hearing their stories, their voices, their experiences. And we have the pleasure of having with us Marcel Lemnaro from the Republic of Moldova, a self-advocate, who will tell us a little bit about his experience of living in institutions, but also living in the community now. And we have with us also Dragana Čirić-Milovanović from the Disability Rights International, who will talk a little bit about the monitoring of institutions, which is another way of hearing people's voices and stories and sharing their experiences and getting their stories out. And we will shortly be joined by Stephen Allen as well from the Validity Foundation. Now this webinar is organized as part of the We Are One festival, who you can see in the background. We are hoping that they will be able to tell us something. They're having some technical issues at the moment, but we will get to them. We will get to them a little bit later. Hopefully, the technical issues will be sorted out.
Can you hear us now, Ines?
Yes, yes, we can hear you. Perfect.
Okay.
Okay, so just before we get to John, I just wanted to say something. We were initially, when organizing these webinars, we wanted to dedicate them to Slavik Wysowski, our colleague in Poland who passed away a couple of months ago, who was at our last webinar in April. Unfortunately, just exactly a week ago, we also lost a dear colleague, Kapka Panayotova from Bulgaria, who I'm sure many of you know was one of the biggest advocates for the closure of institutions in Europe. And well, we just like to take 1 minute to remember her today. 1 minute of silence. Thank you very much. And we know Kapka would like us to continue fighting, so we'll go on. And I'll give the mic to John and Francis from the We Are One Festival, who will tell us just a couple of words about what is happening there. They are in Glasgow, Scotland. John and Francis, go ahead.
Okay. Thanks, Ines. So welcome to Glasgow. Welcome to We Are One Scotland. We're in a place called La Discoteca in South Street, Whiteinch. My name's John Dalrymple. I'm one of the trustees of We Are One Scotland. And in my day job, I'm a social worker, I guess.
Hi, and I'm Fran, and I am also a trustee of We Are One. And in my day job, I work with him as part of Radical Visions. Okay.
So a really warm welcome to the European Network for Independent Living. We're here to present two vitally important seminars, one today and one tomorrow. The overarching theme is an inclusive and welcoming community, not while institutions exist. And it's a subject that's really dear to the hearts of ourselves. So thanks to Nick and thanks to Ines for making all this possible. And we hope that you'll be able to join us for both events today and tomorrow.
And I'm just going to take a minute or two just to say a wee bit more about We Are One. It was founded in 2019, and we decided that here in Scotland and in our partnerships across the world, we needed to celebrate citizenship and diversity, and we also needed to continue to challenge discrimination and prejudice. So that's the purpose really behind We Are One. We staged our first Citizen Fest that year, and then last year we went online for obvious reasons, the same as the rest of the world. We became very better at the online stuff than we'd been before. So we had our second festival there, and we want to just say our third festival is going to take place the 21st to the 23rd of April next year, and will be based around this building here and the north bank of the River Clyde in Scotland. And the other thing we just wanted to say is that, as John mentioned, the scandal of people living in institutions is one that is very close to our hearts, and certainly for John and I and many people in the room here or who are involved with We Are One. We've came together over many years, over the last 25 years, a lot of us involved in closing a big hospital north of the city here in Glasgow. And it's just been part of our whole life's work and continues to be part of our whole life's work now. And so we're delighted to be asked to be involved and to continue to internationally to build a world where everyone matters and where everyone without exception has somewhere they can call home.
So today's seminar, the focus is on exposing human rights violations in institutions and using litigation to get people out of institutions. Tomorrow, there'll be more of a focus on progress reports from all around Europe. At the end of the seminar, there'll be a musical offering from We Are One Scotland. We do hope that you'll be able to stay on and enjoy the music on offer. So we'll just, without further ado, we'll hand back to Ines.
Thank you, John and Francis. It's nice to have some people together also in person, and we are all scattered around different parts of Europe. Just before we give the floor to Marcel, I forgot to say I have with me my colleague Nick Crosby. I don't know, Nick, you want to say hi as well? We have been organizing these sessions together. You're muted now, Nick.
Really good to see everybody. Really looking forward to today. Don't forget that there's a second session tomorrow. The registration link's on the same page on the ENOR website as today's. And it's great linking up with the guys up in Glasgow, long-term friends. And it's really, yeah, it's quite fun bringing different groups together to all, I guess, keep up the good fight. Anyway, over to you all.
Thank you, Nick. Just one final point. We do have captions today, so if anybody needs captions, please just click on the CC button, or you can use the link I posted in the chat. And also, we will have time for questions, of course, but feel free to write any comments or questions in the chat box or in the Q&A box while we are speaking. So without further ado, let me introduce again Marcel. Welcome, Marcel. It's great to have you here. Marcel is with his interpreter, Natalia, and his support person in the background. And Marcel is supported by the Keystone Moldova Association, and he will tell us his story a little bit about his experience before and now. So Natalia will be translating from Romanian. Please go ahead. I will step in the background.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Marcel.
Bună ziua, eu mă numesc Marcel, am 25 de ani, sunt din Republica Moldova. Timp de 20 de ani am stat într-o instituție rezidențială pentru copii.
Hello, everyone. My name is Marcel Lemnaru. I am 25 years old and I am from Republic of Moldova. For 20 years, I have lived in a residential institution for boys with intellectual disabilities.
Acum 4 ani de când trăiesc în comunitate cu alți 3 tineri, am făcut cunoștință cu o prietenă care o cheamă Luminița.
For 5 years, I live in the community in a supported living service. And since I have moved into the community, I met a girl whose name is Luminița.
Drepturile persoanelor cu dizabilități sunt încălcate și nu au un statut legal.
The rights of persons with disabilities are not respected, and I have never had a legal status.
Toți îmi spuneau că sunt copil abandonat. Și eu nu. Unicul document din dosarul meu este cerere de refuz a femeii care m-a născut și m-a abandonat la maternitate.
When I was in the institution, I did not know about my legal status. Everyone told me that I have been abandoned, and the only document in my dossier about my status was the refusal of a woman who gave birth to me when I was who gave birth to me. Yeah.
Multe drepturi mi-au fost încălcate. Nu am mers la școală, nu pot citi, nu pot scrie și îmi creează independența de către alte persoane.
Many of my rights have been denied. I didn't go to school. Because of that, I cannot read, I cannot write, and this makes me dependent on other people.
Nu am o profesie și care visez la ea. E greu să devii jurnalist fără studii bine terminate.
I don't have a profession, and I can't have a profession I dream about. It's very difficult to become a journalist without having a proper school for this.
Nu am un loc de muncă și îmi creează independența de a trăi în comunitate. Mi este foarte greu ca să obțin un loc de muncă.
I also don't have a workplace. I don't work, and this makes some difficulties for me to live in the community.
În Moldova nu sunt bani să transfere persoanele cu dizabilități în comunitate. Nu cred că pandemia ar împiedica acest proces.
In Moldova, there is no money in the public budget for deinstitutionalization, and very often pandemic hinders this process of deinstitutionalization. I don't think that the pandemic should be a barrier for this process of DI.
Statul nu trebuie să se gândească numai de ziua persoanelor cu dizabilități.
The government, the state, should support persons with disabilities along their life during the entire year, not only on the International Day of Persons with Disabilities in December.
Statul trebuie să pregătească serviciile medicale. De exemplu, refuză să revină la primul etaj pentru o consultație pentru persoanelor cu dizabilități.
The state, the government should think about making accessible healthcare services to persons with disabilities. I personally had an issue with this, with accessing healthcare services. The healthcare personnel refused to get downstairs when I needed to access these services, and I felt discriminated in this regard.
Când am fost infectat cu COVID și cu alți 3 tineri, nu erau condiții rele, nu am avut apă caldă. După ce ne-am revoltat și am solicitat mass media, apoi ne-au mutat în alt salon în condiții bune cu apă caldă.
Okay. When I had COVID-19, together with other 3 young men, we have been hospitalized, but the conditions we have been placed in were miserable. No hot water, no enough space to keep the distance, and so on. And only after we have revolted, only after we called the mass media, they created conditions for us. I mean, they changed the place where we have been put after this.
Multe persoane cu dizabilități nu se pot adapta în societate și se reîntorc înapoi în instituții rezidențiale.
Many of those people who are deinstitutionalized cannot get well in the community, they cannot adapt in the community, and they go back to the institution.
Populația trebuie informată că noi avem aceleași drepturi ca și ceilalți care sunt în societate. Și vrem să fim respectați de către societate, să nu fim ignorați.
One of the reasons these people cannot get along in the community is that the population, the general population, do not accept these people. What they should know is what are the rights of persons with disabilities, that we are the same as other people, and they should respect us.
Eu cred că acum singur, dacă o persoană cu dizabilități, nu se va schimba nimic. Dar dacă se vor adresa mai multe persoane cu dizabilități, eu cred că se va schimba tot în țara noastră.
I think that a single person cannot make the change. What is needed in my country not only is for persons with disabilities to join their forces and to become a stronger voice, and the change may happen.
Vă mulțumesc. Thank you very much. Very good.
Thank you for your attention.
Mulțumesc mult, Marcel. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts. You are a great advocate, Marcel, for the rights of disabled people in Moldova, and really, of course, pleased that you're not in the institution anymore. Actually, when I first started working at ECCL, one of the first things was that I did was a visit to one of the institutions in Moldova for boys, and I think that's the place that was closed down, which is fabulous. But I think what Marcel highlighted, and it's so important. Once people leave the institution, it's then also so important to have the right supports in place, so that people don't go back, first of all, but so that people have their legal status, as Marcel said, have legal capacity, are able to make decisions, are able to access proper healthcare, are not discriminated in various areas of life. So that's what I'm getting from Marcel's message. So it's not just about leaving the institution, but also what sort of life people have after. It's important to put that in place. Thank you very much, Marcel. Also, we had a comment in the chat that we have somebody in Glasgow who is also self-advocate and is a journalist, so which I think is great. So yes, maybe there's a chance to, you know, for you to meet this person somehow. Maybe we can arrange it, so you can have a chat and see how he became a journalist, and maybe give you some advice. Or okay, that's great. We can surely do that.
This line doesn't need translation here.
Okay, yeah, no, we understood that. If anybody has questions for Marcel, please put them in the chat box. I would suggest to move now to Dragana to hear from her, and then we can come back to Marcel, and to John and Francis. You're okay there, yeah? Yeah, okay. We'll come back to you too. So we will now hear from Dragana Čirić-Milovanović, also a dear friend and colleague, who is the regional director for Europe for Disability Rights International. And she has a huge amount of experience in monitoring institutions, also in advocating for deinstitutionalization. And of course, the right to independent living. So Dragana will tell us a little bit about her experience. The reason why we asked Dragana to come in is, of course, yes, because monitoring is one of the ways, it's one of the only ways you can get to people in institutions, and hear their stories. So Dragana, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ines, and thank you for inviting me to participate. It's a pleasure to be with all of you. I've been monitoring institutions for 18 years now, and for 16 years it's been human rights monitoring, and definitely one of the most important thing if we were to get objective, and if we want to understand the situation and what's going on in these institutions, is to go and visit as much as we can, as frequent as we can. I will share a presentation with you, just something that I prepared as an overview. So I wanted to just briefly say, what does monitoring of institutions entail? Not in too many details, but it is necessary to do some background research, gather the team, select facilities depending on what information we have. It's very important to build networks of contacts, of people working and living in institutions, because very often we hear testimonies, we hear warnings, and that's when we decide where we want to go, which places we want to visit, and what kind of findings we can expect, so that help us gather the team that is that can help us understand the situation in these institutions. As Ines said, and it's really crucial, on-site visits are the only way to get really the objective situation and insight into the status and situation of human rights of people living in institutions. On-site visits include our observations, interviews, employees with residents, and testimonies. I cannot stress enough how important it is to listen to people and hear their stories, which are very often ignored by authorities, by many monitoring mechanisms, and they're often not trusted. So for us, it is crucial bit of information, and it is crucial to reach out to people who have even challenges in communicating. This is the only way to hear their stories and see how they live. Of course, every monitoring is followed by the report, and report is just a start. Report is definitely not the end of this process. We are using reports for further advocacy, evidence-based advocacy to fight for deinstitutionalization, because that is the ultimate goal, and that is the only way to protect the rights of people who are currently living in institutions. So I wanted to present, to illustrate, let's say, what we find usually when we go to institutions, not only in Serbia, which is this current case study, the most recent that we published in June this year. But it is also the situation across the board, and regardless of the physical conditions, the culture, the atmosphere, and the power relations in these places are the same, regardless where they are. So as I mentioned, this particular findings that I'm going to present are from our latest monitoring we conducted from 2019 in Serbia, and we released the report, Serbia's Forgotten Children, documenting that Serbia has failed to address severe human rights violations and abuses. And one of the most crucial findings was the severe neglect, lack of medical care that put lives and health of children with disabilities at risk. So I'll try to illustrate some of these findings through photos and also through descriptions or testimonies, because sometimes the only way to illustrate situation is through photographs, where people are not able to communicate their testimonies verbally, but also through testimonies that we were able to get from some of the residents. So one of the most common feature in institutions is, of course, inhuman conditions and lifelong segregation. Even if these places are painted, freshly painted, some of them are, some of them are not, they're still segregating people on the basis of disability. And it's not uncommon to find really inhuman conditions. For example, in one of the institutions we visited in 2019, our investigator said that the stench of urine, body odor, feces, filthy beddings was overpowering, and described this place as a hellhole. Another fact illustrating that this is a one-way road is that 79% of children and adults in institutions in Serbia have been there for more than 10 years, and the predominant reason for leaving institution is death. Abuse and neglect are very common. And by that, we mean that people, or children and adults, are left lying motionless in metal cribs, which resemble cages. They're lying there all day long without any rehabilitation, any activities. And many children appear much younger than they usually are. They have muscle atrophy due to lack of activity and immobility. And in one of the institutions, DRI found around 100 children lying in these metal cribs without any activities, never being taken out of their beds. And this long-term physical inactivity, lack of love, touch, literally kills children and is called failure to thrive. As I mentioned, one of the really upsetting findings was the denial of medical treatment to children and adults who are living in institutions. According to one of the staff in institution we visited, children are often denied access to any medical care at general hospitals. And we heard a testimony regarding a child that had to be resuscitated at the institution because staff at the general hospital refused to accept him with the words, "Why did you bring him here? Let him die." Restraints and isolation are also very common. They can look like prison cells. They can fit into very nice furniture and look as a common shelves, but these places function as cages. And some of the testimonies that we hear from residents is that if you get angry, you're given an injection or some pill and you are calm as a plant. And the other one said, "This cage is unlocked because of your visit, but do not say I told you that." So why is it important to do on-site visits and to do continuous monitoring? First of all, monitoring provides us with it has its preventive function. And if these places are open for visitors, if visits are frequent, then abuses are less likely to take place. Also, it enables us to identify cases of abuse and report them to the authorities because people have problem reaching out to the outside world and communicating what is happening to them. It allows us to identify human rights violations that we cannot otherwise get through the official state reports or questionnaires. It allows us to collect crucial information from employees and residents. When you go to institution, you can ask different people different questions. It allows you to check how their testimonies are consistent, whether there are inconsistencies in these stories, and this allows us to really get to the facts that will allow us to address the situation and abuses that are taking place. Otherwise, we would never be able to get this information and reach out to people who live in isolation, who have trouble communicating with the outside world, who have trouble communicating what's happening to them. And very often, this is the only way to hear their voices. The monitoring also, what we use it for is to empower and recruit activists. Through on-site visits, we have gathered many contacts of both employees and residents with whom we stay in touch, who provide us with information, who are alerting us if some of the abuses are taking place. So this is really very important network that it's only possible to establish by visiting these places that are otherwise very hard to reach. There are, of course, multiple challenges in monitoring. Crucial one is to get access to institutions. Previously, and in some countries, it was rather easy to get into institutions when they were not so aware of how abusive these places are. However, most of the governments are now very alert and very and understand that what we are trying to do. So they're limiting access to institutions in order to prevent us discovering human rights abuses. Another issue is the documentation. And as I mentioned, sometimes photographs are the only way to really understand what these people are going through. Very often, right to privacy is used to cover up abuses and to cover up and to stop us from finding out what is going on to people living in institutions. There are, of course, communication barriers. And what I find really hard when I leave these places is that I have to leave these people behind. Always to be aware that this is a process and that we are going for a systemic change, that we want to close these places and that we cannot save everyone. So that is the hardest thing for me, after each and every visit, this feeling of powerlessness that we have to leave these people behind until we achieve a systemic change and the full deinstitutionalization. Until then, it's really important to have frequent and unannounced visits and also effective reporting mechanisms so that employees, authorities are kept on alert, are aware that we are watching them, and that it's really important to engage local advocates, local activists to enable long-term monitoring and continuous monitoring, because us as international organization visiting institutions at a certain point of time is definitely not enough. Thank you very much. That's all I have prepared, but I'm open to any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, Dragana, for sharing this experience, and I mean, yes, highlighting what monitoring involves, some of the things that you find, and also what I mean, yeah, what are some of the difficulties. I would definitely have some additional questions, but I will leave them for later, and maybe we will have some more people coming in. For now, I mean, I guess we need to have a 10-minute break because of the captioning. So I would suggest that we have that 10-minute break now, and then we can come back to Stephen and have some questions and a discussion. So thank you, Dragana. Yeah, and John and Francis, do you want to play some videos now while we're having our break? And our captioner Hillary, you can take a break then.
We just wanted to play a short video, which just gives you a flavour at this point, so people can get up and go and get a cup of tea and come back and they'll not miss anything. But just remind people there's some videos at the end specifically recorded for today. So it'd be good if people stayed on to watch some of those, but we're going to just play this one just now, which is just a compilation of some of the artists and some of the seminars and people involved in the festival.
Okay, thank you, Francis. So Hillary, I think you can take a break now, and we will resume at
I think it's just taking a second.
12:54. 53.
That was extremely, both of those presentations were extremely powerful. presentations. Marcel's was inspiring, and I have to say the second presentation there is just like, you know, very emotional actually, especially for us that have been involved in closing institutions and working in institutions, and yeah, it was harrowing actually, but
Yeah. Thank you guys. Okay, I think something is happening. Okay, that was just a short video. Well, we are still in our break, so I'm just going to hang around here until we come back. Couple of minutes, and we'll see some more music. This looks like a proper festival. We will see some more music a bit later. I'll just see with John, Nick, maybe if something with the screen sharing, if that can be fixed.
Looks like we've got quite a few people watching on the YouTube as well, Dennis.
Good.
John, sorry, I was
Go
just
ahead.
John, do you just want to say a bit about the music that's coming up and give people an idea what they might be, what might be about to fill their ears?
So yeah, yesterday there was recordings made of three folk, a young man called Craig Ingram, another young chap called Kevin Orr, and then Richard Davis. So they're all part of an organization called Paragon, and Paragon exists to help groups of people come together, mixed abilities to produce music and to express themselves artistically. So Craig and Kevin and Richard have all, as I understand it, recorded their own songs, their own material. And so there's three short sets that they have for us. And I think it'd be really worth hearing. So these are three young guys in Glasgow putting their words to music and telling us a bit about their experiences through that. So
cool.
That's coming up later.
Yeah, excellent.
That sounds great. John, when you're sharing your screen afterwards for the videos, just, I don't know, now we could see like the double screen somehow. We could see the Zoom screen shared. So I think it made it a little bit slower for some reason. So I don't know, just share just the video later.
I don't think that will happen the next time.
Okay. Okay, that's
Okay.
good. Okay, we'll just wait for a couple of more minutes, yeah?
Yeah, yeah.
I think it's really good being linked up with We Are One, because We Are One's so much about always remembering it's about people and community. And I think that's something I've learned. I mean, today's event is called It's All About Better Lives. And I think that's kind of the key thing. Having people play music and things adds something quite different to the events that Ines and I have done in the past. But it's really good to keep that message going, that this is about people's lives, and not just about the process of closing places down.
And someone like Marcel brings that to life, doesn't he?
Yes, very much.
You know, particularly for him to say, well, I have no status in my own country.
Yeah.
It's just shocking. So I think the word behind my head, citizen, or yeah, I mean that's really important that we fight for that for everybody, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure we can ask a couple of more questions. Marcella, a couple of more questions. Just wait for captioning. Not yet, Marcel. We have to wait for the captioner to come back. And we'll hear from Stephen first, and then we should have time for questions, which is good. Yeah, but it does sound more fun where you are, John and Francis. You have a stage there as well, or it's just a room and you're.
We're in a nightclub. We're in a
nightclub. Okay, yeah.
Called La Discoteca. And there is a stage at the back of the room, and we do have a small audience with us. We Are One, people who are involved with We Are One are here, as well as the guys that have been helping us with all the tech stuff. So,
okay,
yes.
Sounds good. A disco at in the morning. Why not?
Yes, a venue. We have a venue, a disco venue.
I'm just watching the time.
Yeah.
I think we can come back slowly. Just wait for Hillary. Okay, I see Hillary is back. So let's resume with the second part of the webinar. So we have one more speaker, which is Stephen Allen from the Validity Foundation. Hi, Stephen. It's great to have you here. So Stephen will tell us a little bit about what you do after you've done the monitoring, I suppose, and what you can do to try to actually help people get out by using legal action, going to courts, because that's what his organization does. So then we have a kind of a rounded view of things. And then after Stephen, we can have questions for Marcel, Dragana, and Stephen. So we should have time to do that. So, but first, go ahead, Stephen, please.
Thanks so much, Ines. I hope you can hear me well. Lovely to see you all as well, and thank you for the invitation. Hello from Budapest in Hungary. Before I start my remarks, let me just add my sympathies to the whole team at ENIL and our wider network following the sad death of Kapka Panayotova last week, an incredible friend, an incredible advocate who will continue to inspire us in the fight for independent living for now and for a long time to come. So the theme of my short intervention today is about taking cases to get people out of institutions. And actually, I'm proud to say that Kapka and the ENIL team are some of the best possible activists to work with on litigating these important questions. I'll talk about one case that we did recently together, which was tackling EU financing of segregated residential settings for people with disabilities. So I hope that will be useful. Let me start by saying a little bit about my organization, the Validity Foundation, with whom I'm very honored to work. Validity is one of the few non-governmental organizations in the world that specializes in conducting strategic litigation to advance the human rights of persons with disabilities. Actually, we were created in 2002 with a specific focus on using legal strategies to end the long-term and mass institutionalization of persons with disabilities in Central and Eastern Europe. And you've also heard from Marcel that this is a current problem as well. So our work is not completed even 20 years later. We believe that carefully designed cases have an important role to play. However, our experience shows us that clever cases alone are never enough to achieve real transformation. Today, much of our focus is on working with advocates with disabilities to take cases that strengthen their national and international campaigns. And today I'm going to share three sort of examples of cases we've taken. I'm going to share you the successes, but I'm also going to share the ongoing problems as well, because we don't always win. I think one of the most important and famous cases we ever took was the eponymous Stanev versus Bulgaria at the European Court of Human Rights. And the story of Rusi Stanev is quite well known in the movement, but in essence, this was a man with a psychosocial disability who, without his knowledge or involvement, was placed under guardianship and subsequently found himself condemned against his will in a squalid and freezing institution hundreds of kilometers from his home. For years, he was unable to challenge a decision that had been made by a guardian to keep him there. Indeed, his legal status, as was mentioned before, was taken away from him. And in Bulgaria, this meant he was a non-person in legal terms. This, in real practical terms, means his legal capacity was removed and not even the courts would hear his complaints. Following years of exhausting domestic remedies, the case reached the Grand Chamber of the European Court of Human Rights. And I think it's worth reading the judgment if you haven't. There are many important aspects, including the first ever recognition by the court that keeping people in social care settings is a type of detention. This is important to acknowledge because it gives us strong legal arguments we can use when challenging the involuntary detention and placement of people in residential facilities as a human rights violation in itself. A second important component of the case related to the court's finding that it was this abusive system of guardianship itself that had violated his right to access to justice and meant he was subjected to unspeakable horrors. The court issued directives to Bulgaria after this case to end barriers to access to justice for people under guardianship. And so, in legal terms, This expresses the European Court's view that even in the most restrictive settings, and when people are subjected to the complete denial or removal of their legal capacity, the court should listen to and handle cases initiated by people with disabilities themselves. In Mr. Stanev's case, the judgment was a bittersweet success. The court ordered Bulgaria to take into account his own wishes and told Bulgaria to ask Mr. Stanev about where he wanted to live. The Bulgarian government did just that. And as you might expect, Mr. Stanev chose to leave the institution. Success, right? Well, only partially. Having been released from the facility where he had suffered numerous abuses, he was literally dumped onto the streets with no support, no housing, no rehabilitation. And despite his continuing fight, he remained under a guardianship order and was required to live in various types of congregate settings right up until his untimely death in 2017. This legal action shows us that simply taking cases to get people out of institutions isn't enough. Indeed, our learning from Rusi's case is that legal action must be designed in such a manner as to achieve real support for people who are released. Otherwise, we risk condemning people to other abuses of their rights. The second case I want to talk about is on behalf of a client who I'm going to call Victor and is currently under litigation here before the Hungarian courts. Victor is in his 40s and has spent over 3 decades in institutions in the country, having been placed in one when he was abandoned as a child. Unusually, Victor was never placed under guardianship, but in practical terms, he could never leave the institution because there was simply no housing or support services for him in the community. Some months back, Victor managed to make contact with Validity and told us how he wanted his freedom. He was tired of the regulated and restricted life he had faced for years, and he had simple wishes. He wanted his own flat, he wanted his own job, he wanted a bit of support to help him live independently. We started this process by negotiating with the directors of the institution, but they, of course, were deeply paternalistic. They told us Victor wouldn't survive out on the outside, that he was better off in the institution for the rest of his life. Now, as lawyers, we explained to Victor that there were no legal barriers to him leaving the institution, and we committed to helping him make it happen in real terms by helping him to apply for housing and other support services. And that's when the problems began. Sensing that Victor may indeed leave the institution, they drew up the drawbridge and told us they were instead going to put Victor under guardianship. I'm pleased to say we swung into action immediately and successfully defended this terrible action. At this point, Victor has now been offered a place to live in a small group home, one of those places that are funded by the European Union. But he told us he doesn't want that. Actually, he's very clear. He never wants to live in any type of institution again. He simply wants his own home. No options have been offered to Victor, so we're now in the process of identifying legal strategies to help him reach his goal. Clearly, the role of EU public financing is a problem here. And although I can't say too much at this point about the legal steps we will be taking with Victor, I can say he was deeply unimpressed to hear that European Union taxpayers have been paying for these small institutions. Of course, another piece of learning here, much like in Rusi Stanev's case, guardianship was being used as a weapon against Victor when he decided to leave the institution. This is why guardianship is such an abusive and violative system in itself. Every one of our legal actions for clients have to contend with this huge barrier to access to justice. And we often have to go to the most incredible legal lengths just to get cases into the courts in the first place. Thirdly, while individual cases can be crucially important, alone they do not always have the catalyzing effect that we all want to achieve. That's why in recent years, Validity has increasingly been placing our focus on a new type of case. Cases that are designed to hold policymakers to account for their systemic mistakes, such as when they adopt and implement wrong-headed DI strategies that result in the building of hundreds of new small institutions. One of these cases was a case jointly litigated with ENIL, as well as the Centre for Independent Living in Sofia, represented by our friend Kapka. In this case, we sought to challenge an EU funding call that was opened explicitly with the objective of building new group homes. We complained to the European Commission that this bid directly contradicted their obligations under the CRPD, which both Bulgaria and the EU has ratified. In taking this case to the CJEU, we argued that EU law must be read in compliance with the CRPD, and more specifically, in accordance with the right to independent living and inclusion in the community under the CRPD. Unfortunately, the court, as many others have done before, refused to hear the substance of the case on a technicality. They said that it doesn't matter how much money is being used of EU taxpayers' money, nor how many people with disabilities would be affected, nor how many institutions would be built. Such decisions were not open to challenge by organisations such as ENIL, CIL, or Validity. Now, this might be seen as a loss in terms of the case, but the judgment itself left open a small amount of hope. Indeed, there were statements in the judgment that said people who are directly affected by this type of financing might, in the future, be able to take such a case. And so I don't want to go into the legal technicalities of it all, but this is a massive barrier to effective access to justice affecting people with disabilities across Europe. What I can say at this point is that we also shared this news with Victor in Hungary, and he thinks that it might be time to complain. More cases like this will certainly emerge, and although cases don't always have an immediate impact, my sense is that together they increase the pressure on those in power to make a change. Litigation, I think, does have the potential to play a role in supporting activists for independent living. But our learning is that cases alone are not enough. To have real effect, cases must be part of a much wider strategy that is led by advocates with disabilities and those directly affected. In this connection, our most recent legal efforts are about designing these cases to seek both the enforcement and recognition of what are called positive obligations of states under the CRPD. Now, this is a little bit more complex than the type of cases I've been describing to you earlier, but in a nutshell, our new cases are about asking courts in Europe to both tell states to stop violating rights and, in fact, to order them to provide those services, those forms of rehabilitation, and the forms of personal assistance that people require to live with independence and dignity in the community. These types of rights have often been seen as economic and social rights, and courts are famously avoidant of making pronouncements that push policymakers to spend real money. However, we know that these are the sorts of orders which have the real potential to shift policymakers and resources. Validity is here to work with the movement and activists of persons with disabilities who are fighting for independent living. And I would be very open to a discussion with anyone here who would be interested to talk about those possibilities in whatever country that you're currently based in. But at this point, I'm very sorry that I'm not in Glasgow, one of my favourite cities in the world. But let me thank everyone at ENAIL and all of the organisers of this festival for the opportunity to join you again today. And I hope I haven't gone on too long and it wasn't too technical, but looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Maybe just one little technical explanation for people who don't know maybe what you mean by guardianship. If you can just very simply explain.
For sure, thank you, Ines. So guardianship is a legal system which might have different names in different countries. In Scotland, it's called conservatorship. And this is when people have their right to make legally binding decisions about their life is removed from them and given to a third person, a family member or a public guardian. It has a lot of effects, but things can include you don't have the right to sign contracts, to buy or sell property, to make decisions about where you live, to vote, or even what happens to your body. In some countries, guardianship orders allow guardians to make decisions about medical procedures without your consent and sometimes against your will. And in our work, it's one of the things we fight to challenge and get rid of these systems which are not compliant with international law.
Thank you, Stephen. And I believe Marcel was mentioning it as well when he was saying he doesn't have legal status. So that's the result of being under guardianship, right? So here is Marcel again. So thank you very much, Stephen. I think, yes, that was a very good overview of different kinds of legal actions and some of the challenges, but also, yes, I think highlighting that legal action alone is not enough is very important. I think it's what is of course striking is how long all these processes take, and well, people simply don't have lives that are long enough to be able to sort of to be able to wait for the results of all these processes, and you know, to have in the end to have the proper support and just a normal life. So that's I guess the worst thing about it. But let's bring all the speakers back, and then we can have a little discussion. I would maybe start by asking Marcel a question, who we heard from first, and I wanted to ask you, Marcel, what would be your message to the authorities if you could tell them now what you need, what you would like them to do now? So you're out of the institution, you live in the community, you mentioned some of the problems, but if you could tell them what they should do so that you could live the life that you want, what would that be? I mean, you don't have to say everything, but just what comes to your mind is the most important things. And of course, I'll let Natalia translate.
Yeah, I will translate and then we will get back to you.
Okay. Maybe while, okay, well, let's wait. We have time.
Meu ar fi către autoritățile din Republica Moldova, în special și din Statele Unite, Da? Adică să nu se oprească pe timpul de pandemie, dar să continue mai departe proiectele și să informeze persoanele cu dizabilități cum să trăiască în comunitate.
Ok, lasă-mă să traduc un pic. So my main message to the authorities is not to stop the deinstitutionalization process during the pandemics. And the other important thing is to help persons with disabilities to live in the community through creating social care services. And, tu spuneai ceva despre resurse umane?
Da, adică să nu se oprească aici, dar să continue mai departe cu proiectul acesta și adică sperăm că țara noastră, Moldova, să aibă finanțe ca mai departe să contribuie la integrarea în societatea persoanelor cu dizabilități.
And another important thing is that a lack of money is not the reason to stop the institutionalization and social inclusion of persons with disabilities. So the government should find proper money to support this process.
Thank you very much, Marcel. Yes, I mean, obviously couldn't agree more with you. And well, Moldova is not the country with the most money, of course. It is one of the poorest countries, but what we find is even the much richer countries don't, as Stephen was saying, don't put the money in the right places, unfortunately. So yeah, we must all advocate for the money to be put into the right places, right? You can come back, Marcel, later if you like. I mean, I'll ask Dragana a question, and feel free if you have, whoever is listening, if you do have any questions, feel free to come in. Otherwise, I always have questions of my own. Dragana, I wanted to ask you, in your experience, how do the authorities react to the monitoring reports and results of the monitoring, and maybe what in your experience actually makes them do something? Is it the actual monitoring and the results of the monitoring, or is anything else necessary after the completion of the monitoring process and the report that comes out?
Yes, thank you, Ines, for your question. Yes, most common reaction is denial and defense, but sometimes we do have examples where authorities are recognizing some of the issues, but are saying that we are over-exaggerating things. But that's a good start, because even acknowledgement that there are problems is a good start. As I mentioned before, reports are really only just the beginning. So they give us a tool, they're a tool for our further advocacy. And I found that the most important thing is to keep presence and keep pressure and use the facts, the findings that we collected during the monitoring in pursuing, in advocating for systemic changes. So the report is really just the first step, gathering activists, gathering employees, people living in institutions, creating the whole, movement and support for systemic change is something that we are aiming for.
Thanks, Dragana. So it's about keeping, yes, not stopping at the report, right? And I mean, yes, I guess, well, for all of us, I think the reports, for all of us who don't do monitoring, the reports that you do or other organizations do are useful to be able to show, to illustrate some of the issues, to show those stories. Maybe question, Stephen, for you now. Or Nick, go ahead, please.
Well, I'm just, Marcella said about, it's not just about money, and hearing from Stephen about the law, from Dragana about the impact of the reports. The problem I run into all the time is the way that people think. And I'm interested in your perspectives and from John and Francis about how we change the way people think about their fellow human beings, because it feels like it doesn't matter what we throw at them. And I'm talking about a couple of weeks ago with colleagues in Eastern Europe, it doesn't matter what you throw at them. If people don't see people as equal, it's really difficult to engage in any sort of practical conversation. So just thoughts from all of you about how we change the way that people think about their fellows and disabled people.
Maybe I would ask Stephen if he has any ideas, but maybe also Marcel, you could tell us a little bit whether you've had a chance to go to any meetings with the authorities and whether you find that helpful for changing, their attitude towards disabled people in Moldova. I mean, maybe if you could tell us a little bit about what the reaction is, and also if there are other self-advocates with you as well. But maybe while Natalia is translating, Stephen as well, if you have any thoughts on this.
Thank you. One of the things that institutions and guardianship and these systems do is that they remove people with disabilities from public consciousness, I should say. They remove people from our communities to an extent where here and in many countries, people say, I don't see disabled people in my community. There's a reason that this is the case. And likewise, guardianship means that courts never hear from people with disabilities directly. And so my view is that one of the most powerful tools we can have together is to support people like Marcel and other self-advocates to be heard at every single level. Often for us, we will lose the cases we take because they're often pushing the boundaries of what's possible. But actually, as I mentioned to you, in all of the cases we take, one of the big successes often is simply getting the person heard, because we see in front of our eyes how judges respond when they are required to interact with people with disabilities, when we have explained that communication is possible. And I think that can really help shift the debate. The problem is that policymakers sitting, for example, in Brussels will not get off their bottoms and travel to these places and talk to people themselves. And neither will often ministers in Moldova, here in Hungary. They just don't get off. I think we've got to continue pushing them to do that, because by far seeing is believing and is the most important advocacy tool I think we collectively have.
Thank you, Stephen. Marcel, do you want to come in now?
Vrei și tu să adaugi? Dacă tu te-ai întâlnit cu autoritățile și dacă...
Da, eu vreau să vă spun că m-am întâlnit cu autoritățile de orașul Orhei, grupul de autoreprezentanți și 3 grupuri de autoreprezentanți, unde am participat cu organizația Advocacy de la noi din Republica Moldova și am depus diferite demersuri la primărie. Și
pentru ce?
Pentru accesibilitatea ramperelor de acces, în special de la pizzerii, de la bancă, de la farmacii, stomatologii sau alte spitaluri pentru consultații.
Okay. So Marcel says he recently had an experience of advocacy. He, together with other self-advocates from 3 self-advocacy groups, met with authorities in Orhei, it's a district in Moldova, to discuss the accessibility of public entities in this district. And they also wrote petitions to authorities. Now they have the answer. So the answer is positive on paper. So they promised they will budget money for the next year to make the bank, the hospital, and so on, accessible for persons with disabilities. So this is his recent experience.
That's very good. Thank you, Marcia. I mean, it's great you are out there, you know, talking to them. They can't ignore you if you're there in the meetings in their face. So that's great. I mean, Dragana, do you have any thoughts on this? I mean, it's really about how to get through the prejudice and I mean all sorts of yes. Yeah, well, believes that people do belong in institutions, I suppose. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, this was really a crucial point. My dear colleague and friend, Dr. Eva Sally, was talking about how you can influence people's actions to prohibiting discrimination or abuse. You can influence people's thoughts even by telling them or, you know, using arguments, but it's very hard to change people's feelings. And that's what keeps these prejudices alive. So I think the good way to do that is really hear directly for persons with disabilities, because they're out of sight and out of people's minds, and they had no chance to create any relationship with people who are living in these places. So definitely involving self-advocates, involving people who are living in these places is the only way to remove and to break these barriers. What we do, for example, in Serbia, we are working with a group of women who have been victims of gender-based violence, and we are involving them in trainings, which we do with either service providers, judges. So whatever we do, we have testimonies and presence of women who have been victims of institutionalization and gender-based violence. So this is one of the ways, and definitely you can see on people's faces what a difference it makes when they hear something directly for a person with lived experience of the things we are talking about compared to when we speak about that. So I think that is definitely the most powerful tool, involving self-advocates, hearing personal experiences and testimonies. That's what can move people's feelings.
Yeah, thanks, Dragana. Yeah, I mean, just to say, I've been to meetings where, you know, the European Commission officials will say, well, somebody who needs 24/7, you know, 24-hour care, as they say, you know, you can't expect somebody like that to live independently while having somebody in the room, you know, who actually has needs support 24/7. And it's just incredible that, you know, you're thinking, well, you know, what's in your head? Can't you see that there is a person actually with that kind of experience with you? But I mean, it's great. I mean, there's been so many times where they were then confronted by someone saying, well, so you think I should, you know, be living in an institution because I need 24/7 support. So yes, I couldn't agree more. Maybe Francis and John, do you want to come in? I mean, anything from your experience on this?
I suppose in our experience, having closed a lot of institutions here, visibility is less of an issue, and we have, you know, lots of good policies. And I think what we discover, and it goes back to the next point, is that there's still a kind of professional bureaucracy that gets between the person and the kind of life that they want to live and need to live, and kind of dampens down expectations, kind of acts on the basis of that persistent prejudice that well, it's okay for some individuals but not for everybody, and you know, don't live in cloud cuckoo land, and all that kind of rhetoric that's designed really to make things continue pretty much as they are, rather than change in the direction that the policy, you know, indicates it should. So, you know, a lot of that I think relates to social workers working for local authorities who seem to think that their primary obligation is to the local authority and not to the person, and others in that system. Fran, you want to?
Yeah, I suppose it's just how deep rooted it is. I think that's what Nick's saying, and the prejudice is very, very deep rooted, and it's almost like there's a constant rebooting, and we have to tell the same stories over and over again. We have to be present, and we have to keep telling the same stories or more stories or different stories, because the system wants to rebuild itself into institutions. That's what we're struggling with here. People still want to send folk to institutions. They still want to build small institutions, even although we've spent the last 25 years closing them. So there's a real, you know, there's a real struggle to make sure that that doesn't happen. And there's something deeper about prejudice and belief and that citizenship, that we're all equal and we all deserve. And, you know, how do we get that across? I think it's just constant. And I think everybody knows it's in schools, it's everything that we do, it's that presence, as well as the work that we're doing. It needs to be wider in society, which I suppose is what We Are One's about and citizenship's about. It's got to be, it's more than just dealing with it within our areas of work. There's a deeper, you know, kind of prejudice, I think.
I mean, I think
yeah.
It's like, and thinking about what you've just been saying about new institutions being built, same in England. It's very much like we can change the system, we can change the practical things that happen, but actually the same overriding professional bureaucracy, however we describe it, the prejudice is, you know, daily conversations would suggest that it's not changed that a great deal. And it's, I guess one of the things that Ines and I have spoken about for so long is that this is about building a community of people right across Europe and elsewhere now through We Are One, who can keep the message, keep the work, well, look out for each other, actually, because I think it's pretty tough work on your own. And I know that I've got friends elsewhere who really benefit from feeling part of something. But it's tough when you're trying to challenge prejudice. And that's, anyway, sorry. Over to you, Ines.
Thanks, Nick. I would like to bring, we are meant to end now, but I see Cesar, also our friend in Spain, who would like to say something, so or ask a question. So Cesar, I allowed you to talk. I hope you can say something or ask a question.
On mute.
You're on mute. Wait. Yeah, you have to unmute yourself, I'm afraid.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I have two questions. One is for Dragana and Jim and Francis about monitoring. Don't you think that you have an advantage over disabled people who are visibly disabled because you are not visibly disabled and you are not treated equally or the same way as we are? And the second question later is for Stephen Allen. It is about what you said before about not being able to litigate unless you are directly affected by something the institution or the country did to you. I have doubts about that because what happens if I see a person robbing a lady's purse in the street, and I didn't that, or if I see somebody taking away somebody's car, and I denounce that, or should that person do it directly? Well, I hope that is all for now.
Thanks, Cesar. I hope, Hillary, it's okay with you if we just answer these questions for the captioning. So, Dragana, the first question was for you.
Yes, if I understood correctly, it's about whether in our monitoring we found that there are advantages, or that persons with invisible disabilities have advantage comparing to persons with visible disabilities. So I can say that most often when it comes to people detained in institutions, it doesn't really matter, because whether their disabilities are visible or not, they're treated the same way as objects and not subjects of human rights.
Sorry to interrupt, but the question was rather about you as a monitor, not you as a person being monitored or being supposedly cared for in this institution. What about people who go, for example, on a wheelchair to monitor an institution, or if the person or a person is blind, in that case, they are visible. Thank you.
Yeah, so as monitors, and in particular, my organization involves persons with disabilities in their monitoring teams. And it's really, I understand that there need to be some accommodations when it comes to enabling participation of people with disabilities as members of the monitoring team. It's not always easy. Especially because there are many architectural barriers also in reaching all the rooms in these facilities. Many of them are not accessible. People who have limited ability of who cannot walk or move around by themselves are kept on, last floors of buildings in beds and never taken out. So yes, there are definitely barriers in terms of enabling participation of persons with physical and sensory disabilities in monitoring teams. However, we can only do our best to involve, and most often we have people who are mostly affected by institutionalization. For example, we have people with intellectual cognitive disabilities, people with autism who are very often placed in these institutions. We do have their participation in our monitoring teams.
Dragana, can I come in? I think would be interesting, and maybe that's what Cesar was hinting at, is the attitude the same, of let's say you meet, the staff of the institution, do they have a different attitude to the person, who is to the disabled person on the monitoring team, or do they treat you equally as the, as the monitoring team together? I mean, do you notice a difference? Yeah, I think that's what Cesar was hinting at, because it would be indeed interesting if, let's say if a whole monitoring group was composed of disabled people, what would be the attitude and, you know, the interaction, I suppose. Yeah.
So we haven't had examples where people with disabilities were treated differently, one part of the monitoring team, because when you're coming with a certain role and with a certain authority, so to say, and it really doesn't matter because very often authorities have obligation to cooperate and so it really doesn't make much difference if a person has a disability or not as part of the monitoring team. It's rather about accommodating the person so they can really participate in the monitoring visit on an equal basis with other team members. So I haven't witnessed different treatment. Rather, I can say that persons with invisible disability like myself, our authority is very often questioned because we are not persons with disabilities. We are not perceived as persons with disabilities. So even by some disability rights organizations, my role in the monitoring team is questioned as to me not being or being perceived as a person with disability. So it can go both ways, I believe. Very often organizations of persons with physical disabilities are very strong in certain, very strong advocates, and they're more powerful, so to say, comparing to people with invisible disabilities, more powerful in means of in a way of affecting or influencing governments and authorities, while perspectives of persons with invisible disabilities are discarded as not coming from the disabled people community. So it can, I believe, go either way.
Yeah, thanks, Dragan. I think that what you mentioned is that they have a certain authority. I mean, that's quite key because that, I guess, that helps with that power balance, or, you know, so even if somebody is disabled and would maybe somebody very similar is in that institution, right? But they have a different role and different authority. Let me just say our captioner Hillary has to leave. So thank you very much to Hillary. I would suggest we let Stephen answer. I hope it's okay with everyone if we let Stephen answer the question. And then for Cesar and everyone, we will continue tomorrow with the next webinar. But I'll let Stephen answer and then thank everyone. And then we have some, for whoever can, listen to some videos or music. Yeah. Go ahead, Stephen.
Yeah, thank you. I will be brief. You are right to be skeptical. Absolutely wrong that the courts seem to have this narrow interpretation of who can launch an action. My view is that they must be more open, not just to individuals who are directly affected, but also to organizations like ENIL, DRI and Validity, what part of our mission, our real existence, is to take cases on behalf of people who need to get them in court. So I think we should be skeptical about it. You know very well, as I'm sure do we all, that courts tend to be highly conservative places. So it's hard to push them on this topic. But yes, we should be skeptical. We should be angry when our courts refuse to see these claims. And we must remember that judges work to uphold the rule of law for all. So we shouldn't be scared to remind them at times that they must open their ears and open their eyes. And that is precisely what we intend to do.
Thanks very much, Stephen. Yeah, that's right. So all it remains is for me to thank you all for joining in today. Please join us tomorrow. We have actually a slightly different webinar, like I said, and John and Fran said, hearing from people on the ground, hearing updates about how things are going. I think we will have people from France, Poland, Slovakia, Bulgaria, no, not Bulgaria, sorry, Slovakia, Czech Republic, possibly, Slovenia, definitely, and we will have somebody from Italy, so should be very interesting. And let me just thank all of you, Marcel, Dragana, and Stephen, for speaking today, sharing your experience. And Marcel, we promised to connect you to the self-advocates in Glasgow, so I will send an email if you want to get connected. And yes, maybe, yeah, that's great. So we will do that. And now feel free to leave, whoever has to leave, but I know John and Francis want to have some videos to play, like they said. Go ahead.
Yes, don't leave.
Yeah, don't leave. I wasn't encouraging.
The first video we have is a young man called Craig Ingram, who has written his own materials, just actually had is it a CD you call it? Yeah, what do you call it these days when you... An album produced. So we can start with Craig. He'll introduce himself and his music.
Okay,
hi there, my name is Craig Ingram. I joined Paragon, but I work for the NHS. I did a song back in October 2020 for the nurses. It's called A Tribute to the Nurses, and I did it as a project which was called A Day in the Life. I would now like to play this song. Thank you. On the 23rd of March, the news did come. Lockdown's commencing, this'll be no fun. Shops and businesses grind to a halt. The fear of the unknown weighs heavy on their thoughts. But for the NHS, their work must continue. Despite all the chaos, their work is invaluable. This is a tribute to the NHS nurses with us, and sadly without us. Their dedication not gone, unnoticed by most. These words I use are to describe how the nurses feel during this crisis. These words come straight from them. We feel tired, almost drained. The fear of the unknown lingers in our minds. Worried about our safety, the environment we work in is different to what we are used to. The day seems long and relentless, never ending. This turmoil, this is a tribute to the NHS nurses with us, and sadly without us. But through this uncertainty, the NHS will always and forever stand strong. The second song that I wrote is called Oceans, and it's very fitting for this project because we are all connected through oceans. This desert of blue, mysterious and beautiful, the surface appears calm, but erupts without care. The waves blister and surge, become larger and fiercer, with no sign to clear. The wind shrieks and howls, disturbing the silence. It keeps getting louder. The chaos is endless, with no end in sight. Under the waves, all is pleasant and tranquil compared to the surface, like a war zone in despair. The deep, open wilderness, so vast and expansive, alive in the deep, are spared and compared. The wind dies down, the waves ease off, all calms and stops. The remote landscape resumes order, yet again the disaster is over. Normal practice restored.
So that was our own Craig Ingram there with Leonard Cohen, Influences to the Fore, as you would hear. So we're now moving on to Kevin Orr, and Kevin was also recorded yesterday for today's event, and here he comes.
Yeah, hi there. My name's Kevin Orr. I've got a couple of songs I'd like to play for you today. This first one is called "Just Like You Were Singing." But I hope you like that. Here we go. The songs we were singing left a hole in us all this time. The joy we were bringing left a space that was so divine. The songs we were singing this time, the times we were thinking of what became of this life we knew, the love we were asking to make these things that would all go through. The songs we were singing this time, to the point of saying something in a world that is so inclined, and we were getting somewhere to make this song just so define the path we were walking, with memories stretching out ahead. The truth we were talking of the cherry rich moments we had instead the songs we were singing this time. Ba-da-dum, ba-da, ba-da-dum, ba-da-da-da-da-dum, ba-da, ba-da-da-da, ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. The song we were singing this time, to the point of saying something in a world that is so inclined, and we will get it somewhere to make this song just so defined. The songs we were singing left a hole in us heart this time. The joy we were bringing left a space that was so divine. The songs we were singing this time, the songs we were singing for this time, for this time, and this time. Hi, this next song, this is called The Chance Will Happen. It's basically about two people and the things will change for them, basically, and to make a brighter future for them. Right, I hope you like that. The chance will happen for you, and time will soon change into something new. If we are gonna get by, then we should find this time to rectify, and then we won't defy this time, and then we won't deny the chance to say all these things about you, and then we can still understand, and we can resolve what we planned for this. Don't want to miss all the things we said, thoughts of yesterday's dreams without you. The chance will happen for you, and time will soon change into something new, and I would only lose time over you. And then we won't defy this time, and then we won't deny the chance to say all these things about you, and then we can still understand, and we can resolve what we planned for this. Don't want to miss all the things we said, thoughts of yesterday's dreams without you. Ooh, the chance will happen for you, and time will soon
with that was Kevin Orr. So thanks to him. That was really it wasn't Leonard Cohen like at all. It was very good as well. So we had Richard Davis, we're going to hold off till tomorrow, and we'll have another new person who we will be showing a video of tomorrow. So what we're saying is come back tomorrow and be part of the festival tomorrow. And thank you very much for coming today, and we hope to see you tomorrow.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you. It was great music to listen to, and it's all recorded. So, and on our YouTube. So in case anyone's missed it, they can see it. So thank you all, and see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow. Bye now.
Bye.